Hey, First Baptist, hope you're doing well. I want to talk to you today about the idea of learning with people. The idea of learning with people, together with people. We live in a society that can be very individualistic, and you can end up in a silo, and COVID has helped this, right? Where we're just kind of isolated, and we're learning, thinking, processing things on our own, by ourselves. And there's some real dangers in that. And I think we've seen some of that this last year. And I want to call us back to this idea of learning together with each other, asking each other questions, processing through thoughts together, thinking together, right? And so as we think about that, I think we just underestimate the dangers that come when we learn in isolation in a little silo, and the benefits when we choose to learn together. And just think about Scripture for a second. You know, in Scripture, we have the example of Jesus and his disciples, right? How did the disciples learn from Jesus? Was it in isolation? No, it was together, right? It's not like Jesus said, okay, we're going to have these one-on-one meetings where it's just you learning, and then I'm going to send you off to kind of learn by yourself for a while, and then you and me will have another one-on-one meeting. No, they were living together, all 12 of these guys, and they were learning together. They were processing things together. And we even see that in the Gospels, and sometimes it's almost humorous, but you can tell they're trying to figure things out together. They're learning, they're trying to figure out who Jesus is together. I mean, there are benefits to that. We see the same pattern, I think, some in Paul, and even in Acts, we see him where he's consistently surrounded by multiple ministry companions. Well, what's happening there? Well, they're learning together. They're doing ministry together, but they're also learning together. I mean, then you think of the letters throughout the New Testament. And in the letters throughout the New Testament, they're written to groups of people who were going to learn from those letters together. And in fact, there was an expectation that those letters would be read aloud to the whole church. And they could process them and think through and learn from those letters together. Okay? So this is a big theme, and it's important for us. Don't be in a silo. You know, you can learn all kinds of things. You can get on YouTube and podcasts and, your favorite talk show or news or books or whatever. You can learn so much in our day, but don't learn in isolation. Learn together. Let me give you 3 benefits from learning together. Number 1, when we learn together, it increases our discernment. If you're just by yourself learning, you're so much more susceptible to deception. You can fall into deception so much easier, right? But when you're together, it multiplies your discernment. You can see the holes in maybe a book that you're reading or a podcast you're listening to, or maybe one person can point out, hey, but what about that passage of Scripture? Have you thought about that? Or I know this person said this, but I'm not sure it matches up with this truth, right? When we're together, we multiply, we increase our discernment. So that's number 1 benefit, and it's huge. Number 2 is it just increases our learning, right? It helps us actually learn. In fact, if you feel like you're stuck as a Christian and you're not really learning or thinking about anything, maybe get somebody and just say, hey, I feel like I'm kind of stuck. Can we kind of learn together? And I don't even know what I want to learn. Do you have any ideas? Maybe we just go through a book of the Bible together or read a good book. But let's learn together. It just increases our learning. And not only that, but when we learn together, you're going to think of things that I didn't think of. You're going to see things from a perspective I didn't. And so I'm going to get to learn from you, and you're going to learn from me, and we're going to learn more than if we were just isolated on our own. So it increases our overall learning. So thirdly, then, it also increases or cultivates our unity. Okay, so when we learn together, it helps us stay united. When we learn in isolated silos, guess what happens? You start down a track, think of train tracks that are almost parallel but not quite, and you get down the road and suddenly there's this wide gap between them, right? And that's what happens with people when they learn in silos. They end up far away from their church family and sometimes from the truth, right? I've seen this happen in elder boards and pastoral teams where they start off and one person just starts to learn and think, process things in isolation, and he ends up in a completely different spot. And there's a real lack of unity that comes. Sometimes he's in a good spot and he just didn't bring others along. Sometimes he's in a bad spot and he never got warned and didn't get the discernment of his other brothers. But that happens on an all church level too. You and I are susceptible to that. We can learn and grow or devolve, either way, in a way that messes with the unity of our congregation and our connection with our brothers and sisters. So when we learn together, it cultivates that unity. So think of those benefits. It increases our discernment, it multiplies our learning, and it cultivates our unity. And those are big things. And so just begin to ask yourself this: who can I learn with? Who can I learn with? If you're married, I hope it's your spouse, that you're learning with your spouse, among other people, right? But then your fellow church members, maybe your roommates, other family members, just who are you learning with, right? And then how? How are you going to go about learning together with people, right? So my encouragement, if you're reading a book, read a book. But tell somebody, talk about what you're learning with somebody. Ask questions. I read this in this book. What do you think about it? Or I was really struck by this in this passage of Scripture. And you're beginning to learn with them. Even if you're reading the book by yourself, you can still discuss what you're learning. Or I think of things like community groups are kind of designed for this, to learn together. And we sharpen each other, and we discern together, and we learn together from each other, right? Or I think of my wife has been using a social media video app to go through a book with a fellow church member, where they're reading a book, and then they'll send each other messages about each chapter over video. And it's a way that they're learning together. Or maybe you ask somebody and say, hey, you want to get coffee every other week and get together and go through this book of the Bible, or go through this book together, whatever, right? Finding ways to learn together. Or maybe it's after church on a Sunday where you just talk through the passage that was preached on and what you learned, and maybe some questions about it that you're thinking about. This isn't a quiz thing. You're not teaching anybody. It's just learning together. And so I hope there's a level of just spurring you on in this. There's all kinds of room for creativity, for what this might look like in your life. But let's make it look like something where we don't learn and grow in isolation. We don't process things in isolation. We learn together with each other. And I think when we do, it'll promote the health of our own hearts and souls, minds, but it'll also promote the health of our church family. So, love you guys. Hope that's helpful. Have a great day.